Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Aubrey Sampson, and joined, as always, by my other host, Davey Blackburn. Davey, good to see you.
It's great to be with you guys this week. I am just so thrilled and overwhelmed. I mean, we're in the middle of book launch season, and I'm just like, I just can't believe this is actually here and this is happening. And just the response from you guys has been so overwhelming. So thank you for everything.
Seriously.
Oh, my goodness. And I'm so excited about this conversation because this is a conversation I have been since 2016. I can't say that because we started the podcast 2017, but since I had time with him in 2016, then we started the podcast in 2017. This is somebody I wanted to bring on the podcast, but always said we're going to wait until we release the book because he wrote the foreword to the book, Nothing is Wasted. And that is Pastor Levi Lusko. He's joining us on the podcast today. And I'm so excited about that.
It's a great guest. Yeah, it's such a great guest. And I know, Davey, I mean, I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but I know he was very instrumental in your story. Maybe after the episode, we can talk a little bit about why he was so, crucial in your healing. But I think most people know Levi Lusko. If you don't know him, he's a founder and lead pastor of Fresh Life Church. And he's a best-selling author, speaks at Passion, just a very influential leader for this generation. Yeah,
very much so. And I mean, he's written several books, and he hosts Hey, It's the Luskos with his wife Jenny. I had the privilege of being on that podcast several months ago, and so you can go and listen to my conversation with him. And we also did an exclusive conversation that is not going to be released right here on the podcast platform, an exclusive conversation with him at our book launch event.
Yes.
So only the people who were present at our book launch event were privy to that conversation. We might, Aubrey, release that on our Community Plus platform. You'll have to stay tuned to hear about that. You can go subscribe to our...
That was such a tease. We might do it. But yeah, subscribe.
It just means people need to go subscribe to our email list, and so they can know if we do release that. I'll give you a little hint. We probably will release it. So you need to go and subscribe to our email list, nothingiswasted.com. But without further ado, you've got to listen to this conversation. I'm so excited for you to lean in and to be a fly on the wall as Pastor Levi and I talk about his story and really a lot of the foundations of what led to this entire ministry, and Nothing is Wasted. So listen to this conversation right now. Well, Levi Lusko, man, I can't tell you how long I've been waiting to have you on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I have delayed for, now 6+ years till this moment right here. So thank you for joining me on the Nothing is Wasted podcast.
Glad to be here. 6 years late, but glad to be here. We are just on the heels of having released our Hey, It's the Luskos with you. And it is so funny because you were one of the most requested guests. We'd every once in a while put out, hey, who would you like to have on? And I'm telling you, you were always on that. So now we've come full circle. Here we are.
Wow. Well, what a great thing. I'm so glad, that we have been able to link up again. I remember one of the first things you told me when I came up to Montana back in June of 2016, May of 2016, whenever it was. And you said, we're a part of a club that nobody wants to pay the membership dues for. Oof. And I'm sorry that we're both a part of this club, but I'm glad we're both here.
I mean that like I meant it then. But God sets the solitary in families. And if you're, if your life falls apart, you feel solitary. You feel like, man, no one, like the whole world just keeps moving on. Everyone's sad and sorry for you, but no one gets it. But then when God links you up with other fellow sufferers, you have a fraternity, you have a sorority of suffering. And that's kind of, I think, one of the ways that makes pain bearable.
So good. So good. Yeah. I teach this through a lot of stuff like different webinars or workshops we do at churches and stuff like that. And I talk about how important a community, a brotherhood or a sisterhood is as you're walking through grief. And I always talk about you in that moment and say, hey, here's a brother that stepped in a moment that I couldn't, and he had experienced a similar thing. So he had empathy. He knew what that looked like. I'd love for you to just share a little bit. Mostly everybody's going to know you and your story, but for those who are listening or watching this and they don't know, give us a little bit of, just briefly, who are you guys? Who are the Luskos? And then talk to us a little bit about the grief journey that kind of set all this in motion for you years back.
Yeah, for sure. My wife, Jenny, and I have been married 20 years, and we started out in ministry with the dream of planting a church one day that eventually took the shape of a church in Montana that we're still at, called Fresh Life Church. We were babies when we planted the church. We had got married young, had a child young, so we were kids with kids now starting a church, and we had our second born daughter in the womb when we started the church. We didn't know it though. And so weeks after, the first service, my wife's like, "Hey, I'm pregnant." She told me, I think on her birthday. And when we found that out, we had given up life insurance or health insurance to start the church because we didn't have any backing. We just were base jumping for Jesus.
Right.
And so had to figure all that out and ended up having to pay for her birth out of pocket, which was crazy. And she got hospitalized 2 times right after her birth. And so we ended up like spiraling into debt to just figure life out. And then the ministry side, it was growing. Our family was also growing. Pretty soon we had 4 daughters, Olivia, Daisy, Clover, and Lenya. And so now, opportunities for ministry were really just beginning to open up. I was getting invited to speak places. Life was, I like to say we were living our dreams out. And then simultaneously we lived a nightmare out, because every parent's worst nightmare would be, of course, something happening to your child. You would gladly chop my arm off right now. Just don't let me make my daughter suffer, and I was the one who put helmets on them. I installed their car seats in the car when I could figure that out, because who really knows how to use a latch system correctly? And so it's like I took the protection of my little girl so seriously. And, the only thing I ended up in the end not being able to protect my daughter Lenya from was something I gave her, which is asthma. I've had asthma since the 3rd grade. I ended up genetically giving her asthma, which is eventually at the age of 5, what took her home to be with Jesus. It was Christmas time, 5 days before Christmas, 2012. It was a Thursday night. She had an asthma attack that quickly got out of control. She stopped breathing. I did CPR till the paramedics got there. They took over. They never were able to get a shockable rhythm back out of her heart with the epinephrine and all the things they gave her. And they ended up taking us to the hospital, but she was coded as non-responsive at the house. So she went to be with Jesus. I like to think while I was with her, while Jenny was with her, not in the back of the ambulance. And, it was Christmas time, going through significant loss. It was awful, painful, barbaric. That's not something I would wish on my worst enemy. We couldn't, we couldn't eat. We couldn't keep food down. I couldn't keep my contacts in because they would fog up and then fall out. And we had to somehow, some way find a way through all of that journey to still believe God's good, to still believe he's got a plan, to still continue to persevere in ministry. And by God's grace, that was 2012. So it's 12 years ago. And we've watched God work in our lives in a supernatural way to sustain us in that, and then to use that story as he's been so generous to do so to help other people through loss, like you've mentioned with yourself.
That's right. Whew, man. Something that you mentioned right there struck me, and I don't think I'd heard it or really noted it the first time or the multiple times of hearing your story, but this, like you said that you passed this down genetically to Lenya. And I know there's so many people that spiral out and get stuck because of feelings of guilt. If I had done this, or I could have done something, or this is what I did to, or I'm curious how you have reconciled that. How do you untangle that guilt?
Yeah. I'm an Enneagram 3. So my shadow side always is going to come back down to my worth only comes down to my productivity, my efficiency, my success and work ethic. And so, in unhealth, I tend to go to a mode of I'm not worth anything if I can't accomplish. And I struggled with that a lot after Lenya went to heaven. Went and got a meeting with her pediatrician and sat down and was like, "Hey, why didn't we, how could this have been? What is the deal?" Yeah. I needed answers. And that was part of my, stage of grief I was moving through of refusing to accept that there wasn't something. And this doctor was like, "Look, we did everything. There's nothing we couldn't have seen this coming." and we don't really understand how this asthma attack ended up taking her life. We don't fully understand how and why this triggered some heart attack, why because it's very rare for a child to die of asthma. It's not unheard of, but it's very rare, relatively speaking. And so part of me was like wanting to understand, like, could I have done something better? And it's just, but the problem with going down that road is even if you do win some clarity, you lose because it doesn't help you. It doesn't bring her back. Right. I did the same thing with my dad. Well, he was on hospice. I took the charge of making sure he was getting the right morphine and managing the pain and giving him the medicine that would clear out his cough. And I went into almost like frenetic mode of like, I must make sure this is done perfectly. And of course we were just trying to make him comfortable while he was going to heaven, which was very traumatic. And so I still had to come out of it and be like, this is not something I can work through. So in answer to your question, how have I worked through that? Badly, but I see it, the grace of God in it,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I think that's what you're pointing to is the fact that you do come to a place where you have to go, okay, really, this was completely out of my control. And there's some element in all of our stories where we're trusting the sovereignty of God, and we may not understand it. And we may be really mad at God about that in that moment, but that there is everything that comes into our life comes through the hands of a holy and gracious and loving Father.
Yeah. And it's funny.
That's what's hard to reconcile.
I didn't really ever struggle with that side of it. I struggle with lots of things. I was never really mad at God. I was more mad at me. And I don't know how to figure that all out, but my process, theologically, I processed it through the lens of God allows this. This is what God allowed. I don't believe God causes evil, right? But like you said, he allows it because the devil has to ask permission to sift Peter like wheat or mess with Job. So I somehow knew God allowed this. My part of failing as a father or as a son is where I tend to go to, which I have to find. It's a different problem. It's a pride problem. It's an ego problem. It's a problem of I'm not the Savior. I'm not the Messiah. So I have to get back to that. And I think none of it's easy, but those were my particular crosses to bear.
Yeah. Man. Wow. One of the things I've observed with you guys is just how close your family is, how close you and Jenny are. No couple's perfect, of course, but I mean, even the time that I spent with you guys, I was just admired just the way you guys did things side by side, partnership. You were really locked in and in sync. And as I watched it, I attributed that to, man, they've gone through the fire together and they've come out unscathed, and yes, wounded, hurt, completely in agony, but in the spiritual sense of the term, unscathed, actually stronger together. There are a lot of families that when they go through something like this, especially couples losing a child, that is not the case. You guys have kind of defied the odds in that on some level. What do you attribute that to? How have you guys stayed so close through the whole thing? Well, friends, the wait is finally over. The Nothing is Wasted book is out and available now wherever you buy books. This story is not just Amanda and my story, but it's a part of a bigger story, a story that I promise you, as you read it, it will remind you that in your story, nothing is wasted. Listen, pain is real. Life is hard, but my hope is that as you read this story, you'll be able to see the ways in which God is showing up for you, and he's walking you through, sometimes carrying through the valley, no matter what you face, and that he always is with you. I'm so grateful for you being a part of this Nothing is Wasted community and for you being a part of my healing journey. And I can't wait for you to get a copy of Nothing is Wasted, the book. You can go to nothingiswastedbook.com to order your copy now. You can buy it anywhere books are on sale. And you can also pick up an audiobook if you can stand to hear me reading the book to you. I'm so grateful for you, and I'm excited to hear how this book is impacting you in your own personal journey. Nothingiswastedbook.com. Pick it up today and let us know how it's impacting you.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I think the obvious answer is, but for the grace of God. had it not, it would have been so easy for this to tear us apart. I see that. We felt that, you know, in the initial days, you're trying to sync up grief wavelengths, which aren't always the same. Because if I'm having a low moment, she's having a high moment, that's really hard. But it also is a superpower because then you can be strong with their weak, and someone can take care of making the kids breakfast and changing the diaper while the other one's sobbing on the side of the bed. So there's a mercy in different styles of grieving. But it also, I felt at times like, wow, this really could. I understand how grief can rip apart a marriage. But what I would say I attribute it to, beyond the obvious, this is God's grace to us, is I think we went into grief strong. And I think a lot of times when people talk about, you know, oh man, your marriage is better than ever, I think they're looking at the wrong thing. We had the patterns and the community and the faith system and the tithing records, and I'm not joking when I say that, going into it, that put us at the optimal place to suffer significant loss.
Yeah.
You know, I think the way I say it in my book is you have to train for trials you're not yet in, because according to Matthew, Jesus said storms rip apart houses that are built on sand, but they don't do anything of destructive capacity to a house built on a rock. And I think if you spend the time before a storm comes getting that stuff in, it'll still be awful, but you're going to still be standing. Jesus said the house will be fine. And I think our story is, man, we spent our whole married lives, you know, always in community, always getting counsel when we needed it. Tithing, which puts your heart into heaven. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Where do you want a heart in heaven? Well, once your daughter goes there, you find out if your heart's there or not. We had been faithfully giving. And then as well, like scripture and, you know, communion, all those things, I feel like they put you at the ideal place to suffer.
What, anything that you would say about, I mean, when you're going through this together, you're trying to, like you said, syncing up your grief frequencies. It's just enough for you two to try to stay afloat in your own emotional capacity. You also had little ones that you were trying to, and throughout the course of the past 12 years, you've had, you know, these kids that you're growing up and you're helping them to have this worldview that wouldn't look at grief and loss in just this really pejorative way, this very tragic way, this way that would cause us to spin out, grow bitter. How have you guys led your kids through that? I mean, your kids just seem to be thriving, but I also see on Instagram they're leaning into it with you guys too. Yeah,
you know, as you guys are living out too, the kids are a double-edged sword, because on one hand, you know, had we not had little kids, it would have been a lot easier just to pull the blankets over our head and not get up.
Right.
Eat a pint of Ben and Jerry's, you know what I mean? The show must go on. Like Lenya died on the 20th. The 24th is Christmas Eve. We needed to still put stockings out, which Lenya's stocking was out with gifts in it. But like we still had to have some semblance of a holiday. The last thing we wanted to do is do anything like that. But we had to put a nice face on it, so to speak, for the kids. So in its own way, that is actually a grace, because it keeps you sort of at cruising speed. But we had to also make room for their grief, which was very, very different. Olivia was 7. A 7-year-old can process. She saw and understood the barbarity of it all. Clover was 1. So Clover's grief hit 5 years later, when Clover was 6, and it starts to comprehend, oh, this is what happened. You know, Lennox, who wasn't alive at all, has a whole different grief. Because here we're all talking about, oh, Lenya stories is a photo of me and Lenya. He's like, yeah, great, sweet, never met the girl, you know? And that's hard for him to process. So I think what we've had to acknowledge is there's not a one size fits all. Everybody's grief's different, and no one's grief is bigger or small. Everyone's grief's real. And we just had to give them the space at the appropriate season to process their grief in the way that could help them through it.
Wow. At some point you wrote about this Through the Eyes of a Lion. It's become so impactful to me. It's so impactful to so many other people. why did you decide to write that? I mean, what was the impetus behind it? I mean, was writing something that was always in you? Was this something that catalyzed that? How did that process start for you? Hey, Pastor, are you looking for a resource that will help you minister to people walking through the valleys of pain, whether it be from a loss, a childhood trauma, sexual betrayal, divorce, or anything that has brought incredible suffering and hurt into the lives of your congregants? I know the needs are immense in the church that you serve, and it can be debilitating to even know where to begin. What if I told you that there was a proven path, a roadmap of sorts to help walk your people through whatever pain point they are experiencing and into greater freedom, healing, and purpose? The Nothing is Wasted Pain to Purpose course is just that. We designed it for individuals and churches who are ready to engage their stories of pain so that they can experience healing and hope as they move forward. We know churches across the country who have used this tool and have seen incredible life change in not only individuals, but the overall health of their church. Listen to Pastor Kenneth Wagner of United Church in Delaware share what a difference Pain to Purpose has made at his church.
I tell you, since we launched Pain to Purpose 3 years ago, it has been so impactful in our congregation. Now over 100 people have completed Pain to Purpose. Maybe you're lead pastor and you're thinking like, man, I love this idea, but like I just feel like that I'm not sure if this is for me. My encouragement would be literally to find something. And I've searched far and wide, and Pain to Purpose is the best thing that I have found to help my people walk a journey of turning their pain and finding purpose from their pain.
So if you're looking for tools you need to help people move from pain into purpose, we have what you've been looking for. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/churches. Again, that's nothingiswasted.com/churches. It'll be right here in the show notes. It'll also be right here if you're watching on YouTube, to learn more and join churches all over the country that are bringing healing in a practical, biblical, trauma-informed way to those within their walls. nothingiswasted.com/churches.
Yeah, well, I always wanted to write. I've loved and treasured the written word since I was a little child. You know, I was not good at sports, am not still good at sports. But I always found solace and comfort and a safe place in reading. It was something I could do and excelled at, and it fueled my love of learning. And so I had written Publish or Perish as my 3-word New Year's resolution in 2012. And I began writing in earnest a different book that still to this day has not been published. It's a terrible book. If you ask me nicely, I'll tell you the title. But
Levi, will you tell us the title?
Okay,
please?
I'll tell you the title. It was called I'll Take the Stairs, which is only because at that point, and now it's not the case anymore, the city I live in at that point had no escalator, not one single escalator. And that is an apt metaphor for what church planning in Montana has been like. There's no escalators, man. There's no easy way up to the second floor. You don't just get to stand there. You have to take the stairs. And so it was going to be a book about our, ministry attempts to tame the state of Montana and to match the mountains and all the things. And it was kind of this picture of, I had written the first chapter out of, why we moved here, and just kind of, you get the idea. That was the book. Right. I'll Take the Stairs. Just a way of approaching life. When you get handed a challenge, you don't got an escalator. What do? Take stairs. So
yeah.
I wrote the first chapter and I wrote the outline for that book. And that was a month before Lenya went to heaven. And so obviously the fire for that project went out. My only writing wasn't going to be about that. It was about journaling, grief thing. So what I did, Davey, was, that's one aspect, my love of words and my desire to write that superseded Lenya's homecoming. The second thing was days after Lenya went to be with Jesus, I was talking to Pastor Stephen Furtick, and I was in the school. We have a little school room, pianos in there, sewing machines in there. The kids do homeschool in there sometimes. Actually, that's not true. They usually do it at the kitchen table, but there's a foosball table in there now. And
that's why they don't do homeschool in there, because
there's a foosball table. I was in the closet of that room trying to just have a quiet conversation. He called in between his 58 Christmas worship experiences they were having at Elevation and was praying with me. And he said to me, Levi, I don't know, of course, why God did this, but he said, and I'll never forget it, he said, but in this pain, I believe God wants to give you a mantle, like Elijah gave Elisha a mantle. And the mantle is going to be how you're going to show your generation how to suffer. Yeah. And that just, he said that. And I wrote it down. It really sat in my spirit, right? Like a prophetic word confirmed. And so I just thought, well, what are you supposed to do if you're going to teach your generation how to suffer? I was like, well, you better take good notes on whatever you learn. So I just decided from that day forward, I was going to write down every day anything that was revelation God gave me, anything that sustained me. The way I describe it, you know this feeling. Grief is like being in a dark ocean and you don't know how to navigate, but you'll find an oxygen bottle and you'll breathe off of it and then it'll run out and then you have to find a new one and you're just swimming around finding oxygen bottles, and God in his mercy would give me an oxygen bottle, and it would be maybe something I read in my quiet time or something, an epiphany I would have, just thinking anything that gave me hope or sustained me. I took notes of it. I wrote down every day in my iPhone in a little note called Lenya Lion Log. And it bloated so big, Davey. I don't know if you knew this. You can reach the capacity size on what a note can be on iPhone. Because mine said, you cannot put any more in. I think it was 100,000 words or something like that. Sure. And that was the beginnings of the book. I just didn't know I was writing a book at the time until a year and a half later. My then assistant sent me a photograph of Lenya that I had never seen, with her eyes beautiful and painted with colorful art. I'd never seen it. And of course I get the email, download it, and I start sobbing. But then all of a sudden I go, dang, those eyes, those are the eyes that now these two people, because we donated her corneas, they see through Lenya Lion's eyes. And I remember writing down in my log that day, I got this photo. It encouraged me. If I ever write a book about Lenya, I will call it Through the Eyes of a Lion. And on the book cover, I'll have these eyes, and I will have above it a pair of lion's eyes, because Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And I'm telling you, that's the book. That's the cover. Wow. I've never done that. Like God gave me exactly how the book cover was supposed to look. And now here it's like printed in multiple languages. We got a kid's version out. It's been touched around the world by people who are in pain, but it was like all downloaded in a moment from just looking at that photo. So that's the story on the book.
Wow. It's amazing. It's amazing. You know, you just said something that was really, it struck me, the teaching a generation how to suffer. And, you know, we're doing a lot of work too, with Nothing is Wasted, on how to help people, especially in churches, through Pain to Purpose. And how do we help people? How do we help churches, pastors, church leaders create spaces where people can heal because they have the space to really dive into the theological implications of suffering, and then also have the space to lament, you know? But I look back and I'm like, before, and maybe it's because maybe I wasn't eyes up for it because I hadn't gone through something difficult, but I feel like that, you know, with Through the Eyes of a Lion, like some of this stuff is really, it became kind of very early adopters, early predecessors of this conversation of suffering and trauma, and helping to equip the church in that. And I'm curious what you observe. I mean, you're pastoring, you're around the country all over speaking, you're doing stuff with passion, the lives of young people, and just observationally, why do you feel like we struggle with understanding suffering? What do we do about that? How is that not helpful for us to not know how to suffer when it comes to it being in our faith? Just your observations on that.
Yeah, I mean, these will be messy thoughts, but I'm willing to go there and risk cancellation. No, I'm kidding. The good news is they do have punch cards, and when you get canceled 5 or 6 times, the 6th one's free. So that's kind of nice. I'm on like number 4 right now.
Yeah, but, which one are you on? Okay, all right.
Number 4. We're working on number 5. Fingers crossed. The church. Well, C.S. Lewis called his book The Problem with Pain. So obviously the pain is going to be a thorny issue, right? Mm-hmm. But on the one hand, we have the really unhelpful pressure for faith to not be messy, right? Mm-hmm. So if I have faith, I just got to believe. And so I think there's a stream of Christian teaching or unspoken culture in the kingdom that because someone's in heaven, we're supposed to just be happy about it. You know, hey, your daughter's in heaven. What is there to cry about? You're going to see her again. Well, then on paper, you're right. You know, it's like Amanda's fine. She went to be with Jesus. Shouldn't you be good with that? It's like, well, hold on a second. Are we really trying to push a deeper form of spirituality than Jesus exemplified? Because he wept at the tomb of Lazarus and he knew he was going to raise him from the dead. So, you know, I think partially there's that side of it. And I've found when and part of my message is, you know, that and I think what you're leading, the work you're doing with Nothing is Wasted is so needed and so powerful. But one of the things that I would say is, look, hurting with hope still hurts. And it's amazing. Just that sentence, how it washes over people like, oh my gosh, I felt like I was letting God down because I thought if I had hope, it wouldn't hurt. But it's like, no, you can have faith that someone you love went to heaven, but it still stings like hell to have them taken from you. And so I think when you're able to say it's not one or the other, because I think you can get to a place where it's like, it's okay to not be okay. And then you just let people wallow in not being okay forever, right? That's not the message. We're not saying grieve as those who have no hope. We're saying grieve with hope. Just be okay if you cry. Be okay if it's really hard. Be okay with that lasting a long time and it being, Paul agonized over his thorn in the flesh. Shouldn't he have just said, well, it's all right, I'm good. It's like, so I think when we give the space for humanity and we acknowledge the reality of mental health conditions, right? When we say, hey, these things are real and it is messy and we can still honor God in our faith and still fall on the ground like Job. So those are some of my scattered thoughts on the topic. So but it's not just church either, though. There was a day in NASA, if I'm allowed to just become a nerd for a second, where astronauts wouldn't get counseling. Or if they did, they would go to another city and use different names, because if NASA found out they were getting counseling, the stigma over their file would be, you're not worthy of being an astronaut because you're getting counseling. Wow. So, just put that on for size. So it was just a day where it was just stigmatized to get help and to not appear super strong. So I think we constantly are battling those sorts of things, church and not church.
Yeah. That's so good. Whew, so good. I don't know if I want to go there, but maybe we will, because I'm curious your thoughts on it. I find that even in the conversation now that seems to be in vogue when it comes to trauma, I'm grateful that there's not a stigma on that stuff anymore, that there are a lot of people, even a lot of highly influential celebrities, people are saying, hey, I go see a therapist, so it becomes a lot more accessible and something that's more readily accepted by people. But I've also found that the enemy, it seems like, has hijacked that word trauma, and now we slap the trauma label on nearly everything. Curious your thoughts on that, and how do we even, for our own hearts, how do we kind of navigate that tension really well? How do we thread that needle? And how do we help other people, as we're trying to help, validate what's going on in their life that seems really big, but also help them to get some perspective and go there's saints all over the world who are suffering in the same way that we are, as First Peter says. There's other things that are going on here. Yes. That are bigger.
And what do they say? That's not, that's what Maxwell, that's not a problem to be solved. That's a tension to be managed. Right. So there's not that's just, we can say one or the other. Cause if indeed mental health struggles are a barometer of your level of sanctification, then we got a big problem, because Charles Spurgeon had bouts of depression and struggled with what he called nights of the black dog. Right. So, and I don't know more holier cat than Spurgeon, so exactly. We're clearly all of the previous mentioned, it's all just, you need to just trust Christ more, is not it. But then on the other side, you're saying over here where it's like everything's trauma and everyone's got father wounds, everyone's got, and it's like, then you can get to a place where, I'm sorry, I can't do that. My anxiety won't let me. No. I don't date in real life. I only, I can't go to church. I can only watch church online. Yeah. My trauma, my church hurt. Exactly. I think we can get to the other side of it where it's like everything, where we're not trusting in God and we're not knowing, hey, you still have to choose faith, and you have to put, to some degree, build yourself up on your most holy faith and to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So it's like, I think it's like, these are not problems to be solved, the tensions to be managed, because the devil doesn't care which side of the horse we fall off of. He just doesn't want us to sit in the saddle and ride, which is what God's calling us to do. So good. So it's like, on the one hand, we're validating, and hey, maybe there's need for medication, and yeah, for sure, counseling is where it's needed. But there's also this other side of like, hey, you still, no matter what, even if it takes help to get you to zero, you're going to have to choose to take these steps forward, and it's going to be hard. And, there's going to be all along the way opportunities to sort of be enabled, be coddled, to derive your identity from your issue and your diagnosis or whatever. And instead of still choosing to say it might be hard, it might be difficult, but I'm going to choose to follow God.
Yeah. Wow. Someone told me early on in my journey that God had stewarded this pain to me. And that was it shook me, right? That it was akin to what you're saying that Pastor Furtick said to you about the mantle. Like, here's a mantle that's placed on you. And, but I'm curious if you ever are tired of that mantle, especially the pain one, because it can feel so heavy. Do you ever feel like
the day I got it, I was tired of it, Davey? Gosh, well, I didn't want it. Yeah, I didn't want it. I don't mean that in that way. I just mean maybe you know what I mean. But I mean that conversation.
Like,
like you said, this is the club no one wants a membership card to.
That's right.
But that being said, it's an honor to be trusted with pain. I mean that with all my heart, because of how much God's shown me of his goodness. If he's near to the brokenhearted, then I should be like, wow, I had the chance to get nearer to him. And I feel that. And I would say, and I know you echoed this sentiment, if I could have all of the things God's done in my life through the pain any other way,
right?
No matter how hard it was, I would still want those things. Now, I'm a selfish human, so you give me the choice right now. Where's the paperwork? Lenya back, or all that God did through all this? I'm taking my daughter. All right, I'm sorry. God can do something. He can use a donkey to speak to all of these people that I've gotten to speak to in the books been read by. I'm picking her up every day. But since I didn't get that option, I'm grateful that I get to see this happen all along the way. But God has been so kind and so good and so near. And so, I mean, there's plenty of times I felt tired along the way, but every time I share Lenya's story, I'm sure every time you share Amanda's story, there's a unique sense in which I'm like, I feel near to her. I feel like God's, it's a joy.
Wow. So good. You alluded to this, the conversation that we had for the book launch event. And when we talked about Run Toward the Roar, we talked about some of the different things that, ways that you moved through this that were very pivotal for your journey, for my journey. But you also alluded to this new, fresh season of grief that you're going through with the loss of your dad. And I would love for you to unpack that a little bit more, because I think sometimes we have that belief that, okay, I've just gone through the worst thing you can imagine going through. Now, surely I'll be impervious to pain, or I'll feel equipped to know what to do when it does come better than I did when it first, came into my life. Talk to me a little bit about that journey right now for you.
Hi, friend. Tens of thousands of people receive hope through their headphones each week by listening to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But we know, as well as most people, that healing doesn't happen simply by listening to inspiring stories. You have to engage in deeper relational community with like-minded people who are also struggling through the journey. And you have to apply the practical tools and truths you learn from those who have gone before you. That's why we've created the Nothing is Wasted Community Plus platform. It's an ecosystem of content that you can consume through the power of targeted community. Never again will you have to say that no one understands what you're going through, because through Community Plus membership, we're bringing you both the people who get it and the content that will help you while you journey through it. For just $20 a month or $200 a year with your Community Plus membership, you'll receive access to our extensive library of bonus content, including bonus podcast episodes and on-demand mini courses. Access all of our curated pathways in their entirety, on-demand replay access to all of our exclusive events, masterclasses, live coaching, and webinars, immediate access to Position for Redemption mini course, which is normally $97, and discounts on all of our Nothing is Wasted products, events, and coaching. And if you choose the annual plan, you'll get 2 months free. What's even better is that since Nothing is Wasted Ministries is a nonprofit organization, Community Plus membership is tax deductible. I believe the Community Plus membership will be such a helpful tool for you and your pain to purpose journey. I want to give you a free 7-day trial by signing up at nothingiswasted.com/communityplus. If you're ready to partner with God to take back your story, get the resources you need to help along the way. Through encouragement and practical steps, the Community Plus platform is what you're looking for in navigating your pain to purpose journey. Go to nothingiswasted.com/communityplus and sign up now and join others who are finding hope and healing.
Oh man. My dad went home to be with Jesus April 2nd, which was Easter weekend. It was Tuesday morning after Easter. He suffered for a year on chemotherapy from his diagnosis with pancreatic cancer. And Mayo Clinic, the doctors had told him that he could live a year or two if he kept on the protocol he was on. They knew it was a losing fight, medically speaking, and that he was going to succumb to it at some point. But with a year or two still in the future, none of us were thinking this is imminent. And on Good Friday, the doctors called a meeting with all the kids and him and said, hey, he doesn't have years. He has days, maybe days. Wow. And this is Good Friday. And I'm like, what? I'm in Montana still. I'm like, I'm getting on the next plane. And the doctor goes, okay, do that, but he may not be here when you get here. By the time I got down there, which was 6 hours later, I think I was there, he had lost the ability to speak. His bilirubin level was so high that his mind was clouded. He never regained real consciousness. He sat up and walked a few more times, but was never able to articulate words. And from Friday to Tuesday morning, he was with Jesus. We were supposed to be checking into an Airbnb in Phoenix as a family reunion that week that we had that he went home to be with the Lord. It happened so suddenly, Davey, so quickly. It was very disorienting. My dad was my best friend. Chip Lusko is his name. Best man at my wedding. So it was a lot like losing my best friend and my dad at the same time. And then, all of the connected trauma of my siblings and their grief, my kids and their grandfather, my wife who looked at him like a dad. And I had never really sat down and said this, like, oh, I've grieved my daughter, so I will be good when grief comes to my home again. But I kind of in my head thought surely the credibility of an experience would get me something. And God, it took me out. The loss of a different person. And I think that makes sense if you think about it. I'd never have grieved the loss of a dad before. I've only grieved a daughter, and it's a very different thing.
Yeah. Whew, man. There have been, I'm sure, there were times that when you lost Lenya, that community people, the church rallied around you and really carried you guys when you couldn't walk yourself. Same thing in this season right now. Can you speak to that? Like, how imperative is that you have that community around you and that you be that for other people? Life-changing.
With Lenya and my dad, our church lost their pastor for Easter. I have not missed one Easter in 17 years. But of course, I got more Easters to come. I got one dad. So I didn't think twice about hopping on that plane and missing Easter. And it all worked out great. We had a great weekend. And our church just was there to grieve it with us. People, of course, the meals and the kind notes and the prayers and and everyone felt like a shared sense of loss with my dad, who had been intrinsically a part of and the biggest fan of this church since its beginning. I can't imagine having to face loss like this without the body of Christ, because it's torture with the body of Christ, but just without it would seem almost unsurvivable. So, I think people right now, like I said earlier, you got to train for trials you're not yet in. And if you're not in a church community, now's the time to put roots deep down so that when hard times come, like, who knows your garage code? Who in your life's positioned to just step right in, who's going to almost beat the ambulance to the hospital because they got your back like that, right?
Wow. So good. Man, this has been just an incredible conversation. I'm curious, there's somebody who's listening to this, they're watching this, and they're on the couch like I was. They're completely sick. They're in the lowest of low. They're in deep agony. What would you say to them right now as they're looking for that hope in the midst of all of this?
Well, I would say I'm so sorry, first of all, right? We would just want to sit with you and not try and fix it and manage it, just to absorb it. Like you said, lament is a very important phase, and there's only one way through it, and it's just going to be a minute at a time, hour at a time, day at a time. But with God's people, His Spirit, His Word guiding you, you will get through this. And there will come a day when it will not feel as heavy as it is right now. Not because the weight has gotten any lighter. Sadly, it never gets lighter, but because you will get stronger. And when you get stronger, the same weight will feel like it weighs less. And in that day, you're going to laugh, you're going to dance again, all those things. And there will be a temptation to be, feeling bad because you feel good. But my last thing I would say is when you feel good and you feel bad, it's because you're tempted to think the only thing connecting you to your loved one is the pain. And if you give that up, you have nothing connecting you to them anymore. It's like the last string to the balloon's been cut, but that's a lie. Your healing can then connect you to them just as well as the grief does. And so it's not a betrayal to your loved one to heal and to fully live and to laugh and to dance and to dream. It is, in fact, one more thing God in his kindness through that person is doing in their love for you and your love for them in your life. And so you can just as well honor them through your healing as you can through your hurt.
So good, man. So good. I know you've probably had the same thought, but I mean, every time we do a podcast or go speak at a church or help people with pain to purpose, whatever it is, I always feel like I'm still doing it with Amanda. Like, hey, we're still doing this together. And God's expanded who I get to do this with now with this beautiful, family that I have that I wouldn't have if all this had but I still have this sense of like, we're doing this together. And it's not because of the pain, it's because of the healing.
Facts.
And that healing's rippling out to help other people heal. It's so good. So good, Levi. Well, man, we're going to put links where people can tune into everything that you do, where they can follow you. But man, thank you so much for taking this time. This has just been super special to be able to share this time with you.
Thanks for having me, bro. I'm proud of you.
Okay. I mean, I can see why you love the guy. That was so good. I know that conversation had to really bless and minister our community here at Nothing Is Wasted. Yeah. I want to hear from you, Davey. Like, I know you guys covered some of this, but what did it mean to have a guy like Levi, step into your pain just at that moment? Well,
I mean, it became inspiration for me, first of all, to step into other people's pain. Christy and I have made it a practice that if it, and it's not for everybody, but if it feels right, whether they're someone who, someone who is a little bit more prominent on social media or someone we just hear about, we've made it a practice to go, hey, and not announce it, not tell anybody about it, but like, hey, come spend a couple days with us and just love on them, minister to them. And that's because I had so many people, one of which was Pastor Levi, to do that for me. And it was just so profound, I mean,
it's amazing.
First of all, spending time in Montana, at just like the turn from, I was up there in the end of May of 2016 to spend some time with him. And it was just the turn from spring to summer in beautiful Montana. It was exactly what my soul needed. And to really just lean in on him as somewhat of a big brother in the journey. And I think what also is just meaningful is to know how kind God is, that he would prepare the steps. He'd prepare the way for us. We listened to that message from him a few weeks before Amanda passed away. And so God used his tragedy and his loss and his healing process and him communicating about that in a profound way to prime our hearts to be ready to step into this season of suffering that we were about to step into. We would have never known, right? That was what was coming around the corner for us. But as you look back on it, you can go, oh, and this is what I mean by like Psalm 23, when you look back and go, oh, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. Oh, because it has been following me. And those are things you can only know looking back, right? You don't know something's following you until you look back and you go, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Look at what God did in this. And that's the entire inspiration behind Nothing Is Wasted, the book. It's just a look back on, wow, God, look how you showed up to prepare, to sustain, to heal, to provide, and that really is true for all of our stories.
Yeah. Wow. It is interesting to me that there are things that you can only sort of reflect on. Hence reflection, but retroactively. And you're exactly right. Like you can see the hand of God even in the most dire of circumstances. especially in this way, providing the right people at the right moment that you don't even understand are going to propel you forward into your calling or into your next, when it feels like an impossible time to do that. Right. Which is, to me, always a sign that God is speaking a better word over pain and over evil and over darkness. Right. So I'm so thankful to Levi and his wife and that model that I have for you and Christy.
Yeah. And it's just a really, I don't really know the proper word for it. I mean, I think it's very humbling. I think it's very surreal. I think it's, to know now that this book is out in the world, Nothing is Wasted specifically, that it is doing the same for you.
That's right. Yeah.
And you have no idea what's coming around the corner. I can assure you of this. You have the Holy Spirit inside of you, the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead. He is preparing you, and he will sustain you. People ask me all the time, or they say to me, I would never be able to walk through what you've walked through in the same way that you have. And I'm just like, no, you have the Holy Spirit inside of you. You would. He has given us everything we need for life and godliness.
That's
and
right.
that there's no qualifier on that. It's not like, oh, he's given you everything you need for life and godliness as long as you're on the mountaintop, right? But when you're in the valley, he's like, well, I don't know if I have what it takes to sustain you on this one. No, like this Spirit raised Jesus from the dead, and he has what it takes to carry you through the valley. And you don't have what it takes, but he has what it takes. Jesus will walk you through the valley. And so you don't have to approach seasons of life with fear or trepidation. You don't have to go, oh no, when's the next shoe going to drop, or what's right around the corner for me? You can know God is preparing me right now for the trial that I'm not yet in, and he's going to sustain me through that trial. And so my hope is, as you pick up Nothing is Wasted and you read it, you are so filled with hope and filled with faith to know, man, God is so good. He'll carry me through any season, no matter what I've gone through.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so good, Davey. So good. Hey, we want to invite you to a couple things. First of all, once again, thanks to Levi for being on today's podcast. Incredible conversation. Davey, thanks for bringing him on. But we've got, if you're new around here, or maybe you've been part of our Nothing is Wasted community, you've been listening to the podcast for a while and you want to take another step, we would love to invite you to something that we do called 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story. It's a Zoom call. You can find out more at nothingiswasted.com/start here. Again, that's nothingiswasted.com/start here. That's kind of a next step into your journey at Nothing is Wasted and all of the things that we have here for you as part of your healing journey, like Davey was just talking about. We also want to thank Sleeping at Last for providing all of the music for the Nothing is Wasted podcast. You can download, stream his music wherever it is you do that. And we always want to invite you to like, follow, engage with us on social media. You can find us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. If you're on a podcast platform, you can rate, you can review there. That helps others find these stories. If you're on YouTube, we'd love to invite you to review, like, and subscribe as well. All of what that does is help spread these hopeful stories into the world, into people's lives who are carrying a lot of hurt and need the hope of Jesus. And we also want to invite you to follow us on Instagram at Nothing is Wasted Ministries, at Davey Blackburn, and at ObSam.
Make sure you go and pick up a copy of Nothing is Wasted, the book.
Yeah.
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, nothingiswastedbook.com. It's here, so you can actually get it. You can prime it right now, and you can get it at your doorstep tomorrow, probably.
Might be this afternoon.
Maybe even this afternoon. Depends on where you live. But next week, we have an incredible conversation. You're not going to want to miss this. It is very, very fascinating. It is a part of this book launch series. It's very significant to the book. So go ahead and take a listen to a little clip from this conversation that we have with this special book launch guest.
I really think that there is something profoundly special when you're in a congregation of God's people saying the same things about who God is, or celebrating the same victories, their personal victories, but we all have stories that we can sing out loud together, or we all have prayers that we can bring out loud together. And I just think that it's one of the reasons that I have loved leading worship for so many years, and I don't get tired of it, is because when you're in a room just full of people all singing together, saying the same things together, it's just like a powerful force. It's a powerful thing to witness.
Wow.